Today on CMO School, I want to talk about why so many fractional CMOs are exhausted, underpaid, and wondering if this whole thing was a mistake. Spoiler alert, it's not you and it's not the model. This episode, I'm breaking down exactly what most people get wrong about the fractional role, what it should look like, and how to reset if you're already burnt out. This is the advice I wish I had when I started in the fractional space. So I want to talk about what most people get wrong with the fractional role. I talk to so many fractionals that tell me they're burnt out, and it's really because when I dig into it, I see that they're approaching the role all wrong. So some of the common mistakes I see is fractionals saying yes to things that they should not be doing. So they're doing lots of execution, they're doing so much admin work, project management, etc. And they're forgetting that this is a senior executive level role and they're stepping into areas just because they can. Another thing that I see is there is no clear scope. So they don't really know how to package, how to price, or really how to structure their work with clients. And they end up, just slapping a price tag on a retainer. And with no defined outcomes or no systems and no clarity around scope, it ends up just being a slippery slope and they end up working so much more than they initially thought they would. Another thing is they are pricing themselves way too low. So because they're doing that, they're taking on way too many clients just to hit the revenue goals that they, really want to see in their business. And at the end of the day, I talk to so many fractionals who have just built something that is actually worse than what they were trying to leave behind. So I want to talk about what you should and should not do as a fractional CMO so that when you're working with clients, you have clarity on what that actually looks like. So the first distinction I really want to make here is you're not a marketing manager or a project manager. You're a strategic partner. I talk to fractional CMOs or marketers all the time that are trying to wrap their head around, okay, how am I getting paid more money to do less? And I think it's actually a big reframe because you're not doing less, you are doing less hours, but your responsibility and the value you bring to the business is so much bigger than when you're actually executing on the marketing work. So as a fractional CMO, our job is not to do marketing, it's to lead it. So we're sitting beside our clients, the CEO, and overseeing their marketing function. We're managing their team. We are identifying growth levers. We're setting a clear strategy. We're aligning the team and resources, unblocking them where they need it, and then tracking and adjusting the strategy based on performance. So if you're doing that right, that should not take you a mass amount of hours. And you really want to reframe, you're the person responsible for direction, prioritization, and results, not actually rolling up your sleeves and writing emails or crafting social media posts and sending those out. So again, we are not writing copy, we're not building the funnel, we're not running ads. We are reviewing strategy, approving the plan, evaluating performance and direction. So when you look at it, you're not getting paid for implementation. You're getting paid for your mind and what you bring to the table, your experience, your clarity, your judgment, your leadership, leading the team to drive results, and really deciding what should this company be doing and not doing when it comes to marketing, and how are you making those decisions? So let's talk a little bit about what this role looks like when it's structured the right way. Because even if you're doing the right things here, you do want to make sure you have scopes that make sense at each various package level. So let's talk about the model that actually works for that. So the ideal structure for a sustainable model here with this business is to have few clients. Every time we're getting into clients' businesses, personally, I think if you're doing it right, you are deep diving and you're really trying to understand the CEO, where they're coming from, what kind of a business they want to build, the target audience they're speaking to, their offers, the competitive landscape. And it's a lot. Like, you're diving deep into their business, and to do a great job, you want to have the mental capacity to really do that with all of your clients. So I am a big believer of fewer clients. When you're charging premium rates, and shouldn't even say premium, when you're charging the rates that make sense for the value you're bringing, you actually don't need a ton of clients. There has been many times in my business that I have still been at, 10, 15, 20K months with 2-3 clients. So you don't need volume here. This is not a volume play. So I also want to say it's really, really important when you're structuring your fractional CMO business that you have packages and you're not custom quoting. It's just unsustainable and not scalable. So you want to make sure you have, 2 to 3 packages, and each package has a clear set of deliverables and rhythms that you follow on a daily, weekly, monthly, and quarterly basis. Because once you get into a groove and a rhythm with your clients, you can kind of rinse, repeat, and it's so much faster for you to fulfill because you know what you're doing when, and so does your client, quite frankly. Then you're not having to reinvent the wheel. You're not wondering if you're doing enough or too little. And there's clarity around what you're doing and when. One thing I have learned to do with my packages is just a little kind of side note here is I actually do minimal calls in my packages and only ones that are highly strategic and needle moving. So we're not in the weeds. So our calendar should not be chock full of meetings. And, mine used to be when I first started in the fractional space, I was jam packed. I did everything wrong here that I'm telling you about. And I can share because I've been there and I've made these mistakes. And I think when it comes to calls, I had this moment working with my coach. And she had said, Jess, clients don't really care about the calls. They actually just care about the outcomes. If you're getting to the outcome, which is growth and clarity around their marketing strategy and an aligned team, they don't care if that requires you on one call or 10. And so I really kind of scaled back what calls I did and really went to an as needed model with my clients. And that has just been so amazing for both my calendar and for my clients. I feel like every time we hop on a call, it's totally value packed and we're not just kind of mindlessly running through this repeat agenda or prepping for a call and saying, okay, what am I going to talk about on this call? If I'm ever feeling like that, I always cancel the call. And then another thing here, just related to packages, is I'm so clear all throughout my sales process around boundaries that I have when it comes to communication, timelines, and the way we work. So how much time we need in advance if something is shifting. CEOs can be visionary, so they might have a new program they want to do, or they might want to change dates or whatnot. And I just make sure that I'm really clear on what my boundaries are and how I need to be set up for success to work. And then also remembering too that we're a leader. We're not coming in under the CEO or to be a doer or an order taker. We're a leader kind of sitting beside them as a peer. And so I want you to feel empowered in this role to set your own deadlines, not the other way around. It's fine sometimes if there's some discussion and some back and forth on, hey, this thing's coming up and can you get this done? But you should never be sitting there feeling like you are being given orders and given timelines and told what your scope is. Like you should be really coming in and saying, hey, look, this is what I'm going to do for you and your business. Another thing I want to mention that is so important is that none of what I'm telling you works if you're working with the wrong clients. So let's break down how to spot the red flags before you say yes to working with somebody. And you can kind of also weave a lot of this into your lead process and sales process so you don't get to that point of about to be signing a client and realizing, oh, I actually don't think they're the right fit. The wrong clients will really drain you. And I'm going to walk you through some of the things that I watch for when I'm screening for people. And I have a lot of these questions and things integrated in my lead intake form. So I want to make sure they have a team. If they have no team to implement the strategy I'm giving them and they have no budget to hire anybody, well, guess what? We're going to be left to them doing it, and they're likely busy and also don't have the right skill set. If they haven't been able to do it to date, or what you're seeing needs big improvements, it's unlikely that they'll be able to take your strategy at the level you're giving it to them and be able to kind of run with it. Like, I'll give you an example. If you're looking at like a program sales page and the copy's bad, the positioning's not great, the design needs to be redone, and they don't have anybody, it's unlikely that you can go through and do a CMO level review, which would be, let's say, a Loom walkthrough with some bullet points of changes you'd like to see. And, unless you're giving them exact copy, exact design examples, and all of that takes so long. And again, we should not be writing copy and we shouldn't be going and sourcing specific design examples for each section of a page. But unless you're doing that, a small client with no team and no budget is unlikely that they'll be able to actually implement the changes to the level that you need them to be. The other thing that I really watch for is no clear product market fit or offer. So if a client comes to me and they have a brand new product, or they're just starting their business, and I mean, this is also something to think about too in terms of what kind of CMO you want to be, what kinds of clients you want to work with. But personally for me, if they come and they've been struggling to sell the thing, or it's a brand new thing and their business is really not off the ground, I generally don't work with those types of clients. I think that the whole journey of getting to product market fit and getting an offer off the ground, that is a whole different area of marketing. And it can take a very long time to nail the positioning and get a sales engine that's working. And at the rates I charge, someone either needs to have a whole bunch of pocket money to play with, or other offers that are funding this kind of new thing that they want to get off the ground. Otherwise, it's just not going to work. I've had, in the past, before I was better at screening my sales calls, I would be talking with people and they would say, okay, well, I've just launched this thing and it's not selling, and I can probably afford you for like 2 months, and then I can't, because unless we really get ROI and sell this thing. And I hate being under that level of pressure. I mean, I am always trying to drive sales and trying to make sure my clients get an insane ROI from working with me. But I never want to be under the pressure of like, okay, I'm dipping into my family savings, or, I don't have any revenue. I always tell them, you know what, we can do a power hour, or I can do a mini strategy for you, but I really want to see you go and DIY yourself to a place where you're bringing in some consistent revenue. And you listener, you're going to have sort of a threshold of what that bottom is for you. For me, for example, I don't generally work with clients who are under $1 million in revenue. And in fact, I prefer 3 million and up. For all of these reasons, I really like to make sure they have a very clear product market fit, and we're just coming in to pour fuel on the fire. Let's do more of what's working and less of what's not. Let's align your team. Let's, all of these things. And I personally, I find like under those revenue thresholds, they're still in that messy middle, figure it out part, and they generally don't have team, or they don't have much of a team. There's a couple of other things I watch for too. So even with quote unquote bigger clients, I don't like to be the fix-it CMO. I don't want to be the one who's coming in and saving the day. And that might sound weird, but what I mean by that is I have had too many people come my way with declining sales. And it's that feeling of like being on a sinking ship. And there's usually various reasons why that's happening. Like sometimes it's market, sometimes it's just an offer that's not resonating anymore. Sometimes energetically, they're not into what they're selling anymore, and their audience can feel that. And there's lots of different reasons. But I just generally like to make sure that I'm boarding a growing company. I'm coming onto a company who is doing really well. They've seen growth year over year, and they're really just looking to pass the reins to somebody who can take over their marketing and continue to drive results because they're busy as the CEO. It's not necessarily that they're like, oh my God, come in and help me, I can't do this. It's more about the fact that they're like, okay, things are going well, and I'm the CEO and I'm busy and I just cannot be the CMO anymore. And I want to pass the reins to somebody who I trust to still drive results and help us get to that next level. There's usually some level of acknowledgement that they cannot be the visionary, the CEO, the CMO. They can't do it all. So it's really that I look for. And then the last thing is sort of a lack of trust from the CEO or readiness to hand over the reins. It's a little bit hard to gauge this in the sales and discovery process, but I've learned over, 4.5, almost 5 years of doing this, that there's some little flags to kind of watch for. Things like if they mention they've had multiple people in the past lead marketing and they've never been happy, like that's always a red flag. And I would say with this one, really listen to your intuition and trust your gut, because we know when someone just feels energetically not aligned. And I have worked with clients in the past who are just not ready to hand over the reins. They say they want someone to come in and lead marketing, but they actually don't. What they actually want is somebody who can listen to their strategy and their vision and then go do things. So again, execution, which is not what we are doing. That is such a quick way to burn out, and you're trading time for money in that sense. And then you max out so quickly. You only have I mean, depends how much you want to work, but you only have like 20, 30, 40 hours a week to actually work. So if you tie that all up executing, writing emails, rejigging sales pages, you're going to tap out so quickly. So based on all of this, a few things I'd recommend that you ask during the discovery process. So whether that's through your intake form or on a discovery call, is I would ask a lot of questions about the team. So who is actually implementing or executing on the marketing? Who do they have on their team? Do they have a budget to hire? We're going to start to get to know, especially if you have a niche, you're going to start to get to know the kinds of skill sets you need. So there's more specific questions I ask for my niche, but I always like to get clarity around, okay, who's doing this? Who's doing that? If we were to map out something like XYZ, do you have anyone to do that? Is there budget? And just get clarity around like, what are we working with? You know, I really want to stress this next one because I don't think enough people do this. I talk to so many fractionals who don't ask this question, and it blows my mind. You should be asking about revenue, specific numbers, and don't feel weird about it. Don't be like, let's private, that's their revenue. No, no, no. We want to ask about their revenue in previous years and the current year to date, as well as their goals. And I'll tell you why. I'm going to break down why. One is because we want to know if they're growing, right? I mentioned before, we don't want to be boarding a sinking ship. We want to see that there's been growth year over year. And then we also want to understand, this also gives you a sense of their mindset and, you know, are they realistic or are they totally out to lunch? And I think there's a difference between someone having big audacious goals and then also being really unrealistic. And you can tell, you'll know when you're on a call with people. I think, again, tap into your intuition, but asking about their goals and just being like, okay, is this realistic? Are they saying they want to go this year from 1 million to 10 million? And in previous years, they've been hovering at like 850. That's just probably not doable, right? So that's a really, really important one. Another one would be to ask if they've worked with strategic leadership before or a fractional CMO, and asking them specifically if they have, what has worked or not worked about that. And I just like to hear their answer because it gives me a sense of who they are as a person. And then also it can kind of tease out expectations a little bit. They might say something like, oh, I had this person and I hired them in the past and I got this strategy, but they didn't actually do anything. And that for me would say, okay, there's a misalignment here in what they say they want and what actually I will be delivering. I'm not going to be coming in and executing. So if they think they need a fractional CMO, but they actually want someone to be writing copy and sending emails, there's a mismatch here in expectations. So it just allows that conversation to happen early so you don't get into working with a client and then have to have that conversation later and, you know, leave the relationship feeling disappointment on their side. Another question I really like to ask is what is working and not working within their marketing? And again, this just allows us to tease out what have they tried in the past, what have they not, and it also gives you a sense of where is their knowledge base when it comes to marketing. Depending on your niche, you'll be working with people with varying levels of knowledge in the space. And I find there's kind of this sweet spot. I've worked with clients before who have zero knowledge of digital marketing. And you would think, okay, that sounds great. Like they're just going to hand the reins over and trust you. But sometimes that can be tricky because it's really hard to explain things like when you're breaking down KPIs. It can be hard to explain that things take time. It can even be hard to explain successful results. Like I'll give you an example. I have a client right now where ads is going so well, but she keeps being like, should we turn off ads? Is ads even working? Because she just doesn't really understand marketing. And I'm telling her, no, ads is really working. You are getting like a 2 to 4x ROAS every single week on your ad spend. So when she's putting in $1, she's getting 2 or 3 or 4 back. And to me, it feels like a no-brainer, but I can't tell you the number of times I've had the conversation with her and tried to be like, no, this is working really well. Trust me. I know this is a lot of marketing jargon and acronyms, but bottom line is this is making you money. So, you know, there's a sweet spot, and sometimes they will know so much about marketing. And then again, this kind of brings up that conversation of, are they really ready to hand over the reins of strategy? And are you on the same page about what strategy looks like and means? And then the last thing I ask is, what does success look like to you? So again, I really like to understand they're in the mindset of like, okay, I think I need a fractional CMO. I think I want a fractional CMO. There's something in their head that they know that they want. And sometimes it's hard to get them to articulate it. So I like this question. What does success look like to you? because it really allows them to articulate, okay, in a month or in 3 months, I want to make sure we have more qualified leads coming through, or I would like to take my course sales from chaotic all over the place revenue to a steady income stream of 50K minimum per month. So what is the bottom line, underline in red? What is the most important point for them? So if you're sitting here thinking, this is me, oh my gosh, I've already made all these mistakes, I want to tell you it is not too late. And here's what you can do right now to fix it. So number one, redefine your offer. So you are strategy, leadership, oversight, and managing the team. You are not executing. So I want you to track your time for a week, write down everything you're doing, think through, is there anything that is executional or admin related that you should not be doing? And I'm going to be starting a series where I work through varying little slivers of marketing, and I'll show you what I do and don't do within each piece of that. So that will really help with this. But I want to make sure you have a really, really clear scope and one offer, 1 or 2 or 3 offers. We don't need a million packages. And again, we're not custom packaging. So really get clarity there. You can also kind of reset with your existing clients. And I'll give you a couple scenarios. So if you're in a place where you are just completely maxed out and you've got lots of clients, that's actually a really good thing, because what you can do is redefine your offer and your pricing and your value and kind of repitch it to all of your clients. And what will probably happen is you will lose some of them, but you will keep the others and you'll have them at a higher price point and you'll be doing less in their business. And how you're going to do this is you're really going to kind of pitch to them the strategy and the value that your leadership brings and show them the results. Because if you've been working with them, I know there's been results, and you can walk them through like, this is what we've done. And, I've realized I've been spending my time pulling KPIs or writing copy, and you're overpaying me for that work. My value is in XYZ. And that's really where I want to focus with your business. And I believe I can drive so much more results if I'm just focused there. And we take all of this stuff and shift this off to somebody a little bit more junior or administrative. Next, what you're going to do is you're going to revise your sales process. So you want to make sure you're qualifying your leads and using that list that I walked through and making sure you're talking to the right people, and making sure that in your discovery call, you are using that to kind of further dig in and qualify them, and then set expectations around the role. I often walk through like, here is what I see as the fractional CMO role and how I would come in and work in your company in this space. I usually also have the scope documented. So either in my pitch deck or in the contract, just so there's clarity and there's no misunderstandings, because there's a lot of buzzwords in marketing, strategy, execution, and we really want to make sure that when we're saying these things, we're on the same page about what that looks and feels like day to day. Then another thing, I want to have you look at where you can add process or rhythms to your client work. So you could be looking at your onboarding, your strategy development, things that you do daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, and where can you add some rhythms so that you get into a little bit of a rinse repeat and things become faster and easier for you. Then lastly, I want to see you say no to the wrong clients or even fire some of your draining ones. I'm a big believer of when we say yes to something, we're saying no to something else. So if our energy is so tied up in these super demanding clients or ones who are kind of energy sucks and don't see the value of our strategy or that kind of bigger piece that we bring to the table, they're taking space that an ideal, great, amazing client could fit into. And I know sometimes it can feel scary, but one bad fit client can totally derail your business and your energy. And so I want to see you make room for abundance and spaciousness. So that is my challenge to you. When I talk to fractionals and I hear they're burnt out, all I want to do is get in there and say, it does not have to be this way. And I'm telling you that it does not. It can feel so amazing. It can be such a empowering and time freedom based business. And I really, really want that for you. So if you're building a fractional CMO business and you don't want to waste years figuring it out the hard way, Fractional CMO School is open for enrollment, and we'll give you the step-by-step roadmap that I used to build my business to 6 figures in 6 months and then $1 million per year with a small team of 2. There's expert coaching, one-on-one support, and whether you are an aspiring fractional CMO or you're growing, you're trying to figure out how to scale your team, or do the role in a way that doesn't lead to burnout, it is a great fit for you. And you can learn more at thecmooffice.com. If you love this episode today, here is what I would love from you. Take 30 seconds to rate and review the show. It helps more marketers and CMOs find this content. Hit follow or subscribe so you never miss an episode. And if you're going to implement any of this or you have questions, please don't hesitate to reach out in my DMs on Instagram. I would love to support you. And thank you for listening. I will see you next week.